Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. I'm Hannah August. I am the Director of Communications at Women Deliver. First, just a quick update. Unfortunately, our heads of state had a scheduling conflict and could no longer join for the press conference, but will still be joining us at today's opening plenary. So I want to also welcome everyone who is streaming this press conference through WD Live. And as a reminder for any media who are tuning in remotely, you can also post questions by emailing wd2019media@womendeliver.org. And on behalf of Women Deliver, we acknowledge the lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Thank you. I'd also like to thank Canada, our donors and sponsors, the over 150 organizations that co-created the programming that we're going to be experiencing this week, and of course, the more than 8,000 people that have joined us from around the world. As we discuss how power can drive or hinder progress and change for gender equality, we're going to be bringing together young leaders, government officials, private sector partners, grassroots advocates, and members of the media. And we're going to be handing the microphone to emerging and established leaders alike. And throughout the conference, we're going to be asking all of them, how will you use your power? So I am pleased to use my power now to introduce our speaker, each a powerhouse in their own right. So we're first going to start with Katja Iversen, the president and CEO of Women Deliver, who's going to welcome you and share Women Deliver's vision for our conference. Katja?
Thank you very much, Hannah, and welcome to all of you, and welcome to the Women Deliver 2019 conference. It is the world's largest conference on gender equality and the health and rights of girls and women. So there are more than 8,000 people here from 165 countries, and more than 100,000 people who have either already participated in satellite events or will participate in satellite events throughout this week, and also many, many thousand tuning in live. So this is much more than a conference. It's a fueling station, and it is a very important step on the march towards gender equality. So we are here to inspire the world to harness power for good. We're here to show the power of gender equality, and we are here to catalyze investments in organizations that focus on girls and women, on gender equality, and on reproductive health. And to do that, we all need to harness our power for good. We are in a time of the world where there's pushback on women's rights across the globe. But we're also in a world where a lot of people across the globe, on the streets and in governments, are standing up against this pushback and saying, we will not go backwards. The theme of the Women Deliver conference is power, progress, change. How do we power progress and change? And we have the power with many of our side, on our side, but we also have the power of facts and evidence. In a gender equal world, everybody wins. When we invest in girls and women, there's a ripple effect that goes way beyond the I and the individual. It is the right thing to do, and it is the smart thing to do. But there's a lot of work to get done. We know that girls and women, to have true gender equality, we have to address various issues. It's economic and political participation, it's education, it's nutrition, it's environmental sustainability, gender-based violence, health, including sexual and reproductive health and rights, and more issues. And all of these issues are interlinked, and so does our solutions have to be. This week is focused on solutions and on actions, not on words. The message that we want the world to hear is clear. We are on a path, and nothing can stop us in our drive towards a gender equal world. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. Next, I'm pleased to introduce a true champion for gender equality, Executive Director of UN Women, Phumzile Mlambo-Ngcuka.
Thank you. Thank you, Katja, for those remarks, but also for being a hostess to the mostest. Thank you so much to my fellow panelists, to Minister and to the Government of Canada for hosting us. We are here as UN Women because this is an important platform and space for us to advance the cause of gender equality. I couldn't agree more with Katja that we're here to push back against the pushback. And when women are united and determined, we definitely are unstoppable. This is also a very important moment for us, for the women's movement, because next year is going to be 25 years since we adopted the Beijing Platform for Action. We will next year, in 2020, celebrate, commemorate, take stock, and plan further based on what we will learn about what has happened to the women in the last 25 years. As we speak, we are reviewing all countries, and in fact, the countries are reviewing themselves and producing national reports about what has happened to each country in the last 25 years. UN Women will produce a global report on the status of women in the last 25 years, which will be a subject for discussion at the Commission of the Status of Women in March 2020 and will be presented by the Secretary General of the United Nations. And after that, the women will have a follow-up to this conference together with women from all over the world. That will be a global forum, which will be about giving the baton to the younger people. Some of them were born 25 years ago when we were busy conferencing in Beijing, and now they're strong and old enough to lead us and take us forward. The theme for next year is, as you can see it, generation equality, realizing rights, and this will be a conference that will predominantly focus on the issues that will also be identified by young people. It starts with a kickstart in Mexico City, and the highlights will be in France, Paris, where we will adopt a France-Mexico declaration that takes us forward and that builds on the 25 years of Beijing. But as we do this in Mexico, we will light a torch that will go around the world, galvanizing the discussions of what we're calling coalitions of issues that are critical to take the issue for gender equality forward. And those coalitions will be consolidated in France and will be handed over to the heads of states in September at the General Assembly. We want to speak to the young people all over the world during that process, in every corner of the world, in social media, directly, in small villages, in satellite activities. And this is the conference that is giving birth to that process and galvanizing. And before we leave here, we will hear the voices of civil society that is here, because that space will be their space. So we're glad to be here and to talk about power, because the future will be about what we're going to use this power for, and demanding accountability also from all those who are supposed to be assisting in ensuring that gender equality is a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's also a wonderful transition to our next speaker, Natasha Wang-Mwansa. Natasha is a Women Deliver young leader, a student at the University of Zambia, and an advocate for children's and women's rights. And even though she is still a teenager, she is already a veteran journalist. So I will turn it over to Natasha.
Thank you so Like she mentioned, my name's Natasha Mwansa, and I am 18. So I am here not just representing African young people, but every young person that's out there today. Before I begin, I would like to quote Ms. Jayatma, the UN Youth Envoy, when beginning the pre-youth conference today. She said something that really struck me. She said, these are the times when it's both the best and worst time to be a young person. And when we look at the world today, we see that things like power, prosperity, and wealth, these all belong to the older generation. And yet when we look at the younger generation, all we see is oppression, silence, poverty, and injustice, amongst other vices. And this is really sad because we are the largest population of young people to have ever lived. This generation houses so many young people, but yet why are we getting all the bad vices and yet the older people are not? So this is something that we really need to look into. And when I was asked to speak here, I was told, what would be your key messages to actually bridge the gap and give young people the power that they need to drive change and progress in the world that we see today? And I think my key messages really are, firstly, it shouldn't just be in isolation. It shouldn't just be an NGO's issue, Women Delivers issue. This should become a government issue. Because let's just be honest, one of the key things that we all need is for government to take up the hand and actually make this a priority. So you know how we've got the UN General Assembly, we've got things like the World Health Assembly, and all those gathered there are ministers of health, all those gathered there are presidents. Why can't we have a Women Deliver conference and have ministers of youth gathered here? Why can't we have a Women Deliver conference and have ministers of gender gathered here? Because that's what we want to drive. We want this to actually be taken up as a government issue. So I do believe that this should become a priority, and every government should take it upon themselves to be able to meaningfully empower their young people and take up this agenda as something that matters to them as a nation. It should become a national thing, a priority for every state around the world. Another thing that really should be looked into is meaningful youth engagement. And meaningful youth engagement goes just beyond me sitting here and having a press conference with you and telling you what I want done. It's about creating an environment where young people share the power with the older generation. It's about us giving our perspectives and them actually being taken seriously. It's about us having a voice and it actually being heard and acted upon. It's about us being involved in every single process from beginning to end. We don't just want to be the by the way. Times like for that are gone. We're not just going to be seen. We want to be heard from every start, from the start to the beginning, every process, implementation, planning. We want to be there. We want to meaningfully participate. We want to be involved. We want to be heard, and we want our issues to be addressed. That's what meaningful youth engagement is about. And this should not just come along, because you can't just go on the street and find a young person and expect them to be able to engage with you meaningfully. This has to come with capacity building. This has to come with training. We need to be trained in proper skills. We need to know, and not just for the sake of making the right and informed decisions. No, we actually need these things to be turned into capabilities. So services have to be provided, because what good is saying yes to something and yet not being provided with anything to have that decision acted upon? So these are key issues that need to be looked into. Meaningful youth engagement. Another key thing that I think many people overlook is social accountability. And I love what Ms. Katja had mentioned also. I think she spoke about accountability, if I'm not mistaken. And she mentioned how this is very important. I believe social accountability is the missing gap that's there between what we want, what we need, and what's actually being supplied. It's no longer about transparency. We don't just want to be told this is what's happening. We want to be asked, what do you want done? And we want that done. That's social accountability. And we no longer want promises to be made in isolation. We want to be able to follow up and say, look, Mr. Minister, Mr. President, the UN Secretary General, you say this is what you're going to do about young people, but it's not being done. Please justify, please explain what's going on. That's social accountability. So we need to be able to hold them accountable, and proper mechanisms and channels need to be created for this. I'm sorry if I'm speaking too fast. Zambians have that tendency, but I hope you can get me right. But that's what we want, meaningful social accountability. Another thing is data collection. I think as the years go by, it's very hard to get proper statistics on certain things that are going on. And I feel as though if we don't really know what the numbers are, it's hard for us to properly allocate or to plan or to make anything meaningful, really. So I believe data collection on its own is very important, especially for African countries, really. I don't know, maybe the Western world is doing better at this, but for African countries, this is a very big issue. We don't have the proper numbers, and so it's very hard for us to draft anything properly or to plan anything, really. And so if we don't know, it's going to be very hard for this to happen. And also literacy and community mobilization, really, because the thing is, if we don't understand that health is a right and not just a privilege, we will not be able to demand for it. And if young people are not able to demand for something, then it will not be supplied. And that's how oppression goes on. So that's something that has to come to an end by mobilization and raising awareness amongst young people. Another key thing that really has to be emphasized, this is going to be the last one, it's this is what we really need to look into. It's not about having a youth-friendly corner. I believe many of us know what a youth-friendly corner or youth-friendly space is. Those are very important because it is important for us to have spaces where we can go and access services or information, but then it's about having a global youth-friendly and responsive health system. So we're not just talking about one single place where we can access information or health services and be young and youthful. It's about the whole globe turning towards our issues. So we want this whole globe to actually be a system where young people can be free enough to access services that concerns their health on any other issue, that can be able to empower them, that can be able to build capacity, that can be able to equip them with the right services, the right information, and generally just everything they need to thrive and grow, because that's where the power comes in. It's not about one single component. It's about everything shifting and bedding towards our needs. So I do believe that this conference is really amazing because many of us are here to express ourselves like me, and many of us also here to be enlightened and learn and go back. So I do believe we're all going to leave here feeling a lot more powerful than before. But this is just something I would really love to emphasize for any young person that's listening to me. I think this is the time where we have to emphasize on solutions. Many of the times we come to such conferences and just bring out the same problems, and we don't really say what we want done. It's not good enough to tell the government that we're hungry. Let's tell them what we're actually hungry for. Tell them that you want some chicken or this and that. You tell them. That's what we do. Tell them what we want and then have that supplied. So I do believe that we should utilize this conference not just to emphasize on the problems but the solutions, like Ms. Katja said. So this is going to be amazing, and I'm looking forward to the rest of it even as we open tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Natasha. And you touched on so many important points. And just one of them was about how we need more government ministers involved, which is the perfect transition to introducing our final speaker, the Honourable Maryam Monsef, who is Canada's Minister of International Development and Minister for Women and Gender Equality. She is a trailblazer who has helped Canada become one of the leaders in the world when it comes to gender equality. Turn over to you.
Thank you. Not enough to say we're hungry. You need to say what we're hungry for. Bonjour, Anine, salam alaikum. C'est un grand privilège pour moi de me tenir ici sur ce territoire traditionnel et Musqueam, Squamish, et Tsleil-Waututh. What a great privilege it is to be in this space as a guest on the traditional territory that so many Indigenous peoples have called home for generations upon generations. Many thanks to the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam peoples. On behalf of the Prime Minister of Canada, who is also our Minister of Youth, I'd like to welcome the over 8,000 leaders from over 160 different countries to Women Deliver in Vancouver, in beautiful BC. I understand that there are journalists from over 70 different countries here with us, including media scholars. We thank you for amplifying the voices that exist here. You've heard from 3 leaders here at Women Deliver, and they represent a snapshot of the voices and the stories and the power there is at this gathering. I'll divide my remarks into 3 components. Talk about yesterday, talk about today, and talk about tomorrow. And then if there are any questions, we would be happy to take them. Yesterday, today, tomorrow, both in the literal sense and in the broader historical sense. We are here right now talking about gender equality as a driver for economic growth, with leaders like at the UN proudly proclaiming themselves to be feminists, the Prime Minister of Canada proudly proclaiming himself to be a feminist, among many other leaders. We are here in this moment in time, not accidentally, not easily. We are here because of a movement that has worked hard to bring us to this moment in time, a movement that has existed long before any of us got here, the movement that has persisted and has celebrated milestones like that in Beijing, and a movement that'll continue long after we're gone. And it's important to honor the work, the pain, and the sacrifices that has gone into achieving the progress that we see to this day. Yesterday, literally yesterday, I was able to be a part of an Indigenous pre-conference, one of about a dozen pre-conferences taking place here in BC. And our government was invested in this conference in many ways, including financially, because we deeply believe that the voices of Indigenous women, their strength, their challenges, and their resilience has to be top of mind and very much a part of the conversation that the world's women and feminists are having here in BC. Yesterday, I was able to announce the single largest investment that a government's made in the sustainability of women's organizations, both in the developing parts of the world and here in Canada, with a $330 million investment. Part of it is supporting women's organizations here in Canada. So if you want to support Indigenous women, those are in rural and remote communities, if you care about gender equality and want to support women's organizations who are the best way to advance equality, you can contribute to the Canadian Women's Foundation, the Community Foundations of Canada, as well as Grand Challenges Canada, who is doing great work in supporting Indigenous women innovators, and your dollars will be matched dollar for dollar. And if you would like to also support the work of women's organizations around the world, those protecting and advancing women's rights, Google equalityfund.ca. This is a platform that has brought together for the first time ever governments, NGOs, philanthropists, and the private sector, all rowing in the same direction to achieve equality around the world. Let's come to today, which is the first day of Women Deliver. Many thanks to Katja and her team, and of course, my team within the Government of Canada for convening us. Today is day one of the world's largest gathering on women's rights, health, and well-being, and Canada is doing its part to convene world leaders and activists on this front. We bid on this. And this is kind of like the Olympics for feminists. We literally had to bid on it. It was a competitive process. And we wanted to host this important gathering here in Canada because we see equality as a driver for economic growth. It's about tapping into the $150 billion economy here in Canada when we increase the participation of women in our workforce over the next decade. It's about tapping into the $12 trillion economy that is the gender economy around the world. We see that working here in Canada, our plan to grow the middle class, to support those working hard to join it, has very much included the intersectional gendered lens being applied to the work that we do, and the proof is in the pudding. Over the last 3.5 years, we've turned a stagnant economy into a growing economy. 1 million Canadians have jobs now, and those jobs didn't exist 3.5 years ago. More women are working now than ever before. More young people, more Indigenous people, more newcomers, more persons with disability are working now than ever before. We have the lowest unemployment rate we've had in over 4 decades. We have the lowest poverty rate we've ever had. 300,000 kids here in Canada are no longer going to bed hungry at night anymore because our plan is working, and that plan sees gender equality as a driver for economic growth. So we wanted Women Deliver to be here because we want to work with the world's leaders to advance equality all over the world and to learn from the passion and the expertise and the best practices that exist. We also come to this work with a lot of humility. Today is an important day for Canada as the report from the National Inquiry seeking to find out what happened to our stolen sisters presented its report to the Prime Minister earlier today in Gatineau, Quebec. We thank those who have been part of this work. We thank the families and survivors and advocates who have worked to ensure that there is a national inquiry in the first place. And we honor and remember our stolen sisters and as you heard the Prime Minister say, the challenge and the tragedy of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls is not a relic of the past. It is very much a reality for us here in Canada, and we will work to do right by our stolen sisters and implement a national plan to prevent and address this violence from happening in this country. We have a lot of work to do here at home. We accept that. We also know that we are stronger when we work together. Earlier today, we had a ministerial with representatives from over 20 different countries, and we brought in the room young leaders. The Prime Minister says young people aren't the leaders of tomorrow, they are leaders today. And you see to the right of me a clear example of how true that is. This is the most powerful generation to have ever lived. And we all do well when we harness the power of their generation and learn from their wisdom. So let's talk about tomorrow. Of course, there will be an important announcement that we're making, more on that tomorrow. Our focus is to collaborate, to cooperate, to harness our collective power, to find across our divisions unity and stay focused on one common goal, ensuring that our kids and grandkids have a future that means they are equal in every way. And over the next decade, as we get closer and achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, we are counting on women to be rising. We are counting on feminists to rise. And I look forward to looking back on Vancouver 2019 and say, that was a watershed moment where we seized the momentum that was there and accelerated progress to ensure that more voices like that of my sisters here are raised, elevated, and honored. Merci, miigwech tashakor.
Thank you so much. We're now going to take some questions from all of you, the media. So if you could line up at the microphones and in consideration of your colleagues, please limit yourselves to one question per person.
What's that smell?
Can I go? Excellent. Thank you so much. This question is for Minister Monsef. I want to ask you, how does Canada's stated commitment to gender equality around the world match up with some aspects of its foreign policy? For example, selling billions of dollars of worth of weapons to Saudi Arabia, which is currently detaining a number of women's rights activists, and also Canadian mining companies that operate abroad in places like Latin America, where mining companies are embroiled in a number of human rights abuses, where a lot of women are facing the brunt of this violence in terms of sexual violence. If you could comment on those, that would be great. Thank you.
Can you tell us your name and the outlet you represent, please?
Sure. My name is Aruba Jamal, and I'm a journalist with Open Canada.
Thank you.
And let's just take the two more questions, and then we can answer them as a group.
Okay, my name is Tessa Vikander. I'm with the Star of Vancouver. My question is for Katja Iversen. Katja, you said that we have the power of facts and evidence on our side, and that when we invest in women and girls, there's a ripple effect, and it's the right thing to do. But we've seen in so many ways in politics in the past couple of years that facts and evidence don't necessarily mean action, and don't actually necessarily mean that the right things happen. How do you reconcile that?
Great, and we'll just take the one last question here, and then...
Hello, my name is Justice Bedu. I work with Joy News from Ghana. And my question goes to Minister Monsef. The Canadian government has been giving a lot of funding to NGOs that work in the area of child marriage advocacy in Ghana. And one of the challenges that I have found out doing stories on child marriage is a lot of the funding goes into advocacy, which is raising the issue of child marriage and its existence. But then there is the other part, which is helping all of these young women who are taken out of these child marriage situations and then getting them back into education, into training, so that then they could become self-reliant. But when it gets to that stage, there's no funding for that. And so we have in Ghana a lot of young women and girls who have been taken out of child marriage situations, and they are just there. They are not in school, and they cannot get on with their lives. And then the issue is that there is no funding, there is no government commitment to ensuring that all of these people are brought back into the mainstream world so that they can get back onto their feet. How are you planning to move on to the next level to ensure that you are not just funding to raise advocacy, but then you are helping to address the situation on a more sustainable level?
Thank you.
Okay, let's start with those three questions, then we'll see how our time is.
Okay.
Minister?
Thank you very much for your questions. When it comes to our domestic policies as well as our foreign policies, Canada has begun applying an intersectional gendered lens to everything we do, whether it's in the consultation phase, in the policy development phase, in the implementation and evaluation, this lens is being applied. In fact, it became the law to apply this lens to all federal budgets in December of 2018. When it comes to standing up for human rights, Canada does that very clearly. You've heard Minister Freeland rise and stand up for women, but also for those whose dignity and rights are violated, whether it's in Saudi Arabia or other corners of the world. I will say, in the history of Canada's Confederation, there's never been a government that has worked more diligently in a more focused way to advance gender equality than ours. There has never been a government more focused on protecting the environment and addressing climate change both at home and abroad. And there has never been a government that's had a feminist international assistance policy before. And this is something that my predecessor, Minister Bibeau, had put in place. So the announcement we made yesterday to support women's organizations, grassroots women's organizations, who, when we did the math, received half of 1% of the development dollars devoted to gender equality. That's because we want to do our part at home and on the international stage. Our Feminist International Assistance Policy is also allowing us to provide a comprehensive approach to addressing inequality in our neighboring countries. That means ensuring that she has the right to choose if, when, with whom, how many kids she's going to have. That means ensuring that she has access to clean water and sanitation and proper nutrition, and that she's able to go to school, as my colleague from Ghana said, and that she receives an education that provides her with the skills that she needs to gain meaningful employment, if that's her choice, and to be able to stand up on her own feet and have a voice on the international and national stage. We are beginning a really important chapter in Canada's proud tradition of international development and peacekeeping, and we will continue to build coalitions to ensure that we do right by our citizens here in Canada and those around the world.
Katja, there was a question for you around what to do when facts and evidence don't necessarily lead to change.
Yeah, around fact resistance. Yes, just because some people are fact resistant, it doesn't mean we give up on facts and evidence.
Yes.
We know that the combination of facts and evidence and the voices and stories, the lived experiences from girls and women themselves, is a very powerful tool. We want to activate we want to move the heart, activate the brain, and kind of get people to use their hands. So the combination there of facts. We also see that facts actually drive a lot of action in many places. This conference will focus on solutions, what works, that people agree on, and then we look at how can we scale it and do it some more. You will be privy to good new facts and evidence coming out this week, whether it's from Equal Measures 2030, new report from McKinsey, State of the World's Fathers. There's a lot of very strong study that comes out on the link of childbearing and economic empowerment. There'll be a lot of good facts-based stories. And when you combine that with the solutions that these more than 3,000 organizations that's here bring to bear, then I am sure that that will be the fuel that can drive more action and really see the scale up.
Great. And there was also a question about investing in advocacy versus investing in service provision. And Katja, perhaps you might also want to address the importance of investing in advocacy as well.
Absolutely. Where the world is today, I think it's proven beyond facts that we can never give up on advocacy. We can't take for granted that the progress we have seen that we will keep. So the voice of people, the voice of young people, the voice of the organizations on the front line is so key. And that advocacy that can reach the people in power, whether it's political power or money power, is very, very important. So the investment in advocacy can never be given up, and we need to scale it up. But it, of course, doesn't mean that we don't have to invest in other places as well, because young people and children need to go to school. We all need to be healthy. There's so many, women need to work, be active in political sphere. So those investment needs to happen too. I would say it's not one that rules out the other. It has to go hand in hand.
Yeah. Phumzile, you wanted to add to that?
I think also, in addition to the question about Ghana, this has to be a partnership between the government and the people of Ghana and the other countries. I don't think that we can expect that the donor has to take responsibility for the full value chain. There has to be some form of partnership, because for these interventions to be sustainable, they have to be embraced and owned. And we have to spend our own money in Africa in these times of situation. Fortunately, Ghana has free education now. I would imagine that advocates should also advocate for these girls to benefit from the generosity of the Ghanaian government that is providing free education for girls. And in fact, Ghana has said one of the reasons why they want free education up to secondary, it is because they want to keep girls at school longer so that they don't marry early. So we need you to advocate in order for these two trends to close. Investment in advocacy and the uptake at a programmatic level by the institution of the land.
And Natasha, I think you had.
Yes,
also
I
wanted to
did.
add to that.
I wanted to add on the data collection, because someone did mention saying they don't always marry the two. Like, just because we've got evidence doesn't always mean that we've got progress when it comes to fighting whatever we're fighting. And I am a social accountability monitor where I come from, and we do a lot with numbers, and we look at what the government says and what they're supposed to do, and we use an evidence-based approach to actually get or turn our rights into capabilities. And I do believe there's a lot of power when it comes to actually knowing what's on the ground and data collection, because it's one thing to just set up the scene and say, oh no, we need access to health because many people are sick. And it's another thing to say, statistics show that 2,000 people are sick in this district, and hence we need access to health because it shows that in this district where access to health is actually a thing, there are less people who are sick. And so it comes out a lot more stronger. I do believe that data collection is the missing link, because then one thing that people have to realize is if you don't know how big the problem is, it's very hard to address it. And statistics help us show how big the problem is. And like it has been mentioned, of course, data collection is not always saying this is the solution. Data collection is saying this is how big the problem is and this is what can drive the solution. So it's like a propeller. It actually causes the solution to be brought to the table. You say this is what the problem is, here's the data, here's the evidence, and now let's come up with a solution. So it is very important actually that we have data collection. It's not the only thing that's needed, like it has been mentioned. It has to come with a solution, but it is very important. And I just want to talk about advocacy because I am an advocate and I have been advocating for close to 6 years now. And I believe there's a lot of power when it comes to advocacy. We should not neglect the mere thing of me just talking to a minister and telling her, look, minister, the problem is this. Gender equality is... There are many girls out there who would like to be in leadership, but they just don't have the right capacity. They just don't know how to do it. They haven't been built enough. Their mindsets need to be changed. There's a lot of power in just that one interaction because an idea is spread with just a conversation. You don't change the world by coming in and putting in $1 billion. You change the world by talking to someone about a simple problem. So I do believe that investment in advocacy is very important, and it's what actually drives people to action. So it is very important that we actually do have this conversation solutions, we dialogue, we talk, we invest more in this, and then we can take it out there, because if we don't know what we want here, it's very hard for us to do anything on the ground. And it's very sad, because I am also a big advocate when it comes to ending I don't believe it should be called child marriages. It's very pedophilial, it's inhumane, it shouldn't be called that.
Yes.
But ending that act is something that I'm very passionate about, and I do believe that we need more work on the ground, because it's one thing to sit here and let's say solution, idea, this, that, and it's another thing to actually go back home and say, this is what I got and this is what I'm going to do. So I would urge even you, the media, because you're able to influence someone to hate a political party. Why not influence the whole world to actually fight against this? So you too have enough power to actually influence the world and act on this issue. So it's not always about what the minister can do, it's about you. What are you telling the world out there? How are you setting the agenda for us? I am a child journalist and reporter, and I know how much power the media holds. So this is also to you. I urge you, the media, do your best to set the agenda so that people can actually be involved in this fight for gender equality, for female empowerment, for youth leadership, for youth power. Let this conference itself be a big issue. Let it be your headline for 2 whole weeks. Let people be irritated by it, because that's the only way we're actually going to drive change, by changing the minds of people, what they hear, what they see, and what they think. It starts with you as well. Thank you.
Yeah. I would say, unfortunately, we are out of time, but fortunately, that was the perfect note to end on. So thank you for that, Natasha, and thank you to the entire panel for their powerful contributions, and to all of you for your questions. And I would just like to remind everybody tuning in remotely on WD Live that you can follow all of the official press conferences here this week through streaming. And with that, let's go kick off with the opening ceremony. Thank you all.